So last week, we looked at the first mark of mission, to proclaim the good news of the kingdom, and just shared what it might feel like and why we are called to equipped to share the good news of the gospel of the kingdom, some of which we've been singing about and will continue to sing about in our hymns. And when I was thinking about this sermon today and the second mark of mission, to teach, baptize and nurture new believers, lots of things came into my mind. Today we had Rise and Shine in the church hall, and it was packed with families and young people who were receiving something of the teaching of the Christian faith. Amongst them, there was Elaine and Dylan. And along with Dylan's sister Lauren, they were baptized a year ago tomorrow in this place. So what spoke to me today was about the legacy of teaching and baptizing. And we have a lovely couple here who are going to be married, and they're connected to the legacy of teaching in this church from another minister. So what people hear in church or in the home or in the school or in Rise and Shine or in Sunday groups matters, and it stays with people. And we're part of the team who are equipped to teach, baptize and nurture new believers. So I want to suggest to you today, whatever you feel you are part of a team helping to teach, baptize and nurture new believers. And hopefully you yourself have been baptized, taught and nurtured in this church, or maybe amongst another church family that was important to you. But when I was planning this, it happened to be around the same time as the British Social Attitudes Survey was published. Okay, so back in 1983, if you remember, those marks of mission were set up in 1984, just a year after this. So in 1983, 31% said they didn't have a religion. Today, that figure is 53%. This is in the UK. Okay? Only 3% of 18 to 24-year-olds identify as Church of England. 3%. 40% of 75s and over identify as Church of England. So if you're in or approaching that age bracket, you're kind of talking to people who kind of understand and get that. So when you're ministering or sharing with them about the Christian faith, you're talking about ground they know about and they're comfortable with, because 40% of your age bracket identifies with the Church of England. They might not know what it means, they might not understand the gospel of Christ, but they identify as Church of England. And this was the shocking stat for me. There are more people now in Church of England schools every week than there are in our churches. Just let that sink in. There are more people who are likely to hear something of faith in their Church of England school than there are in the whole of church attendance combined in the UK. For me, that was a shocking statistic. I don't know if it is for you. So clearly, we're not doing a great job of teaching, baptizing and nurturing new believers over the past 30 years, if we look at the stats. But that might not be your experience, because you're here today on this beautiful sunny day when you could be at a car boot sale or you could be visiting a stately home. So you're part of the committed core of Christians, which is shrinking. So therefore, if people don't come to church when they're invited, or we're too scared to invite them, that core will shrink even further. Rise and Shine today proves that when people are invited and something is there that's appropriate for their age group or their context, people will come, and that has grown. That congregation has steadily grown. So let's thank God for that and be encouraged by that. For you, your task might be about sharing your faith where people are in their context, in your workplace, in your home, in your neighbourhood, in your village. That might be your call and challenge, because maybe those people don't feel brave enough, or don't feel welcome enough, or don't feel they're going to get enough from being here at church. So I just want that to those stats to just sit there for a moment and for you to think about them and how that might inform how you might feel confident or not about sharing the faith. 53% no religion. Only 3% of 18 to 24-year-olds and more people hearing about Christianity in our schools than in our churches every week. A bit more of an encouraging picture. When I think about nurturing, which is one of the words we use in this particular mark of mission, teaching, nurturing and baptizing, I think of these images, something breaking through the top left image out of the everyday, something that needs careful watering, many hands holding the seed and soil there. Maybe several people will be involved in that nurturing and growth of faith. But our final image on the bottom right, it can be a little overprotected and cosseted if we're not careful. We can only trust maybe one or two people to talk to us and share things about our faith. And that can lead us not to flourishing as God would have us to flourish. Nurturing. And what about teaching? Well, we have some teachers amongst us today, and I'm pleased to say the teachers amongst us, I'm sure, are very good examples of teaching. And we'd all like to think in our church, in our Sunday groups, or in our home groups, we get great, sound, helpful, challenging, and thoughtful teaching. That's what we'd all want, and I'm sure what we'd all like to think we do. But maybe the reality for some of us is somewhat short of that. Maybe some people at church feel like they're back at school, maybe being talked down to or patronised, shouted at, condemned. Maybe not enough recognition of the wider experience and wisdom we all share. That slide there in the bottom left, none of us is as smart as what's in all of us. We've all got something to share. It's not about the person in the pulpit, 6 feet above contradiction, talking down at you. Hopefully, I'm inviting you into something that I would like to think could be more of a dialogue. And we're not children. We do need a bit of depth now and again. And we do need good teaching, as was reminded from Chris's passage in the Galatians, Paul's letter to the Galatians. And because of that, we might sit back and we might think, well, it's all right for you saying this, David. You've been to college and you've clearly got an interest in theology, and most of us aren't like that. And in the days of the early church, obviously, it was a lot easier then when they had these giants of the faith teaching them, and everybody had nothing else to do and no distractions, no cinema, TV, theatre to worry about, and they were just focused on the things of God. That's a load of rubbish. There were as much distractions in the first century as they are now. They might not have been as technologically sophisticated, but life was full of distractions because of the way people lived their lives, because of what people thought was important in their lives then. So they had similar problems that we had in engaging with faith. And our gospel reading that Megan shared with us tells us something remarkable. Just think about this for a moment. Jesus has died. Jesus has risen from the dead. If I can put it like this, Jesus had the marks of mission in his hands and his feet. You saw his marks of mission. He was crucified, and after resurrection, those were still in his resurrected body. Even when Jesus was present, there was doubt as well as worship. People couldn't quite believe what they were seeing or experiencing. But here's the good news. I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it because it's hard for us to grasp it. Jesus gave the Great Commission to those who worshipped him and those who doubted him and weren't sure. He didn't separate them off. He recognized that they all had something of an experience of Jesus to share with their friends and family. They would all be invited into the Great Commission. And that's what happened. All of the disciples all of the disciples shared something of their story. So we can be called to this task even if we don't feel fully equipped. And we're to go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey what Jesus said, because he is with us until the very end of time. That's the key. We're empowered by Jesus if we want to accept that. And Chris from Galatians talked about the frustration of the Apostle Paul. I'm astonished that you are so quickly deserting the one who called you and turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Sometimes people like me are guilty of watering the gospel down so much it's really no gospel at all. It's not distinctive. It's just another Sunday lifestyle option. That isn't what we're called to share in. That isn't what we're invited to accept and believe. And Paul was pleading to them. He said, brothers and sisters, the gospel I preach is not of human origin. I didn't receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it from revelation by Jesus Christ. So it's quite clear, even in the early days of the church, the gospel ran counter to the culture of the day. It talked about things that weren't quite acceptable in the culture of the day, just like today with our faith. We will say things and pray about things that people are quite uncomfortable with. It was always like that. If the work of God is going on within us, there will be a peace and a reassurance, but there'll also be a stirring up. There'll also be a call to think about things differently. It wouldn't please everybody, and it would be challenging to live by. The good news about that is here we're baptizing, we're teaching, and we're nurturing new believers in the context of a team. It's not just about David, Alison, George, Jonathan, or David as clergy and readers. It's about developing teams, and we know that through the Mission Action Plan. As clergy, we have a lot to be thankful for in this church, because when someone comes forward and says they would like to be baptized or they'd like their child to be baptized, there's a visiting team that gets pulled together, and that isn't the clergy. So we have teamwork that's based on an idea of sharing our faith. Yes, it might be firstly to people who have asked the questions, but there's no reason why that shouldn't equip us to share our faith in all circumstances and at all times, which we're called to do, because it's all rooted in prayer and we're all heading in the same direction of travel. We all have the opportunity to grow, to develop our faith, and to grow in confidence about sharing it. This is what really frustrates me. Here are some mission action plans. I just went on the internet and wanted to see churches' mission action plans. Can you see what's the common denominator? Anybody at those pictures would like to be brave enough to shout out, there's 3 mission action plans there. What have they all got in common? Buildings. Absolutely right. Buildings. Absolutely right. And at our last growing group meeting, we were talking about things that seem to get locked up in our faith within the walls of our church buildings. However beautiful they are, they never really seem to get outside, because our mission strategy is just about inviting people to come to our buildings. When it works, it's fabulous, isn't it? Like Rise and Shine. When it doesn't work at all. So it's very hit and miss if the strategy is all wrapped around an invitational culture to come to your building. Beautiful though our buildings are, and I've been a member of English Heritage and the National Trust, so I understand and respect beautiful buildings and wonderful architecture, but it's not the whole picture. These cards were developed to put in churches with beautiful architecture, because clergy and others were realizing people were coming in their churches, looking at the buildings and the stained glass and going away with no idea about what was going on in that building when people gathered to worship. That's why this was developed, for a building's strategy only. But here, these are covers of mission action plans that I like and I think speak something into what we're talking about: nurturing, teaching, and baptizing new believers. And the gentleman at the bottom there, you see the joy on the faces of the clergy and the supporter and the guy being baptized. Just a little reminder to those of you out there who haven't been baptized but would like to think about it: baptism isn't christening and just for babies. We're pleased to do that, and that's a wonderful thing we do in our tradition in the Church of England. But baptism can also be for adults, and each year the Archbishop of York, outside York Minster, has a big birthing pool and baptises adults. So adults can be baptised as well as children, as I was reminded of today with Elaine in Rise and Shine. God asks us to go outside the building. God asks us to think about how passionate are we about our faith? How passionate were we or are we about our baptism? Because the Bible, in the New Testament at any rate, is full of stories of passionate baptisms, of adults whose lives were turned around. The Ethiopian eunuch, the Philippian jailer, Jesus himself choosing to be baptized by John in the Jordan as an outward sign of an inner commitment to follow God's plan. And what about growing? Here are some things we do at Christ Church. Talked about the baptism visitors. There's the cover of a CPAS video there, First Steps. That gets shown to most baptism families. It's a little DVD that talks them through what baptism is. So there's teaching in it. We have faith pictures, which we'll be running again, which helps people articulate something of their faith and how they might describe it, if they had to describe their faith like a picture. Down the bottom right there, we have Bear Grylls. Now, he doesn't come to our Alpha group, which disappoints a lot of people, I know. But we do run, and we'll continue to run regularly, an Alpha journey for people who want to go deeper into the Christian faith. And at the top right-hand picture there, there's just a representation of home groups. Christ Church does have a number of home groups. And if you're not part of one, but would like to know more about that, do speak to us. Because it would be nice to see a church where the majority of regular attenders were part of a home group or came along to Lent courses. So those are the things that you can get involved with. Home groups, Rise and Shine, baptism, confirmation, marriage preparation, Alpha. We could have prayer partners, people who you trust and you would like to help you with your prayer life. Our Faith Pictures course. You can follow up the sermons and the Bible readings. You can listen to them again in some cases, or you can look up the readings for yourself and think about them, and then speak to the person that gave the sermon. We have our children's groups, and we share with each other. So we are a church that is already teaching, baptizing, and nurturing new believers. But there's always more we could do. And you may well be sitting there today thinking, I'm not baptized, I don't feel taught, and I don't feel nurtured. And if that's you, as I said last week, remind us it's our responsibility as a church, through the PCC and through the teaching team, to keep mindful of what our main purpose is as a Christian family of God. And if we're not doing that for you, come and tell us. Come and tell us how we could do it that would help you. Come and tell us how we could improve, and we will listen. We will listen, because as a church, we want to know Christ and make Christ known. That's what it says on our seed. So we want you to know Christ deeper, and we want you to be able to make Christ known to others, and we want to do that as a church. So speak to us. Think about your own personal responsibility for growth in your faith, in our faith. Tell us when we're not doing enough. We don't want to be complacent. So we introduced this last week. We're talking about 5 marks of mission. They're on the front of the seed, so you can see those 5 marks of mission. You can see where we're headed with this sermon series. And our challenge is, we're not a church that happens to do a bit of mission. God is a God of mission who expresses that mission and love for us through church, through the ecclesia, through the gathering of Christians. That's who God is. That's who we are. And we want to do that better. We want to know God more. And we want to appreciate how that love transforms our life and the life of all humankind. So, your mission, my mission, should you choose to accept it, is to get familiar with those 5 marks of mission, to feel equipped as a Christian who is growing yourself and has a passion for others to grow in their faith. 2 weeks ago or so, we had Education Sunday. We talked about new beginnings. Maybe you're in a season of a new beginning, however long you've been a Christian, however familiar this building is to you. Maybe your challenge, your mission, could be something as simple as thinking about one thing you might want to do or explore in relation to growing or deepening your faith and equipping you in mission for this autumn. Will it be baptism? Will it be confirmation? Will it be faith pictures? Will it be Alpha? Will it be a home group? Will it be something entirely different? And my prayer is that God will gift us all with the desire to be lifelong learners in the gospel. May we support each other in this journey and know that Jesus is with us each step of the way until the end of time. Amen.